a case in this one is in John Dido Laurie's book, True Dharma I. It says Zen Master Dogen's 300 koans. And this one is number 211, Caoshan's love between the parent and the child. And the main case is Caoshan was once asked by a monastic, a child went back to her parent. Why didn't the parent pay attention to her? Caoshan said, it is quite natural like that. The monastic said, well, then where is the love between the parent and the child? Caoshan said, the love between the parent and the child. The monastic said, well, what is the love between the parent and the child? And Caoshan said, it cannot be split apart, even when hit with an axe. So again, I'm going to read it again, it's short. Caoshan, and this is with the notes with it. Caoshan was once asked by a monastic, a child went back to her parents. Why didn't the parent pay attention to her? And the note is, they meet but don't recognize each other. The child went back to her parent. Why didn't they recognize each other? And Caoshan said, it's quite natural, just like that. But then the monastic asks again, well, but where is the love then? Where is the love between the parent and the child? And Caoshan just said, the love between the parent and the child. It's beginningless and endless intimacy. It's a continuum. But the monastic persisted. He said, but what is this? What is this love between the parent and the child? He doesn't know. And Caoshan said, it cannot be split apart, even when hit with an axe. So what is this? On the face of it, we could say, well, this happens. We parents die, we have a connection, between maybe our child is angry with us, or we have a fight with our family, or that we lose connection. Or cases of illness or mental illness, all these things happen. And yet the love is still there. There's no ending of it. And then, koans are they always go another level and another level and another level. There's always just like more to think about or not think about. But in any case, so we can look at it between the parent and the child being like, the parent is the absolute and the child is our relative self. And why don't we recognize it? It's always, our connection with wholeness is always there, is always present. But we don't always get it. We don't always understand it. And in this note, he says, the monastic says, but what is the love between the parent and the child? And the note is, he's still sitting by the river, dying of thirst. There's that old phrase, standing in water, crying, I thirst. We're totally immersed in wholeness all the time, and yet think somehow we're missing it. And in Tibetan practice, there's a teaching, there's a concept of ground consciousness, mother consciousness, and child consciousness. So, and I mean, it's a bit dualistic, but you know, here we are talking about the inconceivable. You know, we say, oh, well, a dharma is beyond name and form and beyond all concepts, you know, and then we continue to talk about it for our whole life. So, so the idea there is of recognizing, and it's a meditation practice of actually recognizing like basic awareness or ground awareness, our basic wholeness, and the feeling of like mother prajna paramita, like recognizing the prajna paramita, that our small self knows that or becomes connected to it in a conscious way, even though they were never separate or to start with. So it would be another kind of inroad that I think about in relation to this koan. And it does also, the parent and child kind of image, you know, puts me in mind of grandmotherly mind. And you know, what is that? What is this loving mind that there's loving connection between parents and children, between everything, that we're totally interconnected. And you know, I see it as really unconditional friendliness, like unconditional friendliness. And it has to start really with ourselves. We have to develop unconditional friendliness for ourselves, and then are more and more able to find unconditional friendliness for the whole world. Exemplar of that, when I think about this exemplar, you know, the Dalai Lama is a great exemplar of grandmotherly mind. And there's a couple of Book of Happiness, maybe, I think I read it in there. They described the Dalai Lama going, he was traveling and he was staying in a hotel, and he just greets everyone with such an open heart and such direct kindness, and offers the same amount of care and attention to the maid as he does to the you know, the High Lama that he's talking with. And so by the end of the few days that he was in this hotel, the whole staff of the hotel came to say goodbye to him. They were at the door because he had touched them so much with his just grandmotherly mind, with his kindness. And another image I have of him was I think I saw a newscast or something where this was when George W. Bush was president, and I was pretty mad at him at that point for how he handled the 9/11 and invading Iraq and all these things, and I was, so to me he was the enemy, kind of, you know. And I see the Dalai Lama there with him at the White House, and they're standing, and the Dalai Lama, you know, George W. is kind of, he always has kind of deer in the headlights look anyway. And then, but the Dalai Lama has his arm around his shoulder, and he's kind of patting him very sweetly and looking kindly at him and holding his hand and patting him. And I think, oh, it is so sweet. he can extend. There's some like really seeing the Buddha in every single person. And so I just, I love that image. And for me, and a number of people have mentioned this, I think Sherry mentioned it, and Chelsea, that having, when your children were born, for me, when my children were born, I have twins that are now 41. And it was the best day of my life. Brings tears to my eyes still. And I tell them that every birthday. I tell them. And it was, I guess every mother thinks this, but it was like, I thought I had done the most amazing thing in the history of the universe. No one had ever done anything quite as remarkable as having a child. So there you go. It's and further, I never could stand getting up in the morning. I hated getting up in the morning. I hated being woken up to get up in the morning. Going to school, I had a stomach ache every day, Monday of the 5th grade, because I didn't want to get out of bed and go to school. And then as a young Zen practitioner, getting up for the 6 a.m. sitting was pure torture. I would get up and I would try to sit, and I'd sit under the cold window, and I'd be like falling asleep, starting up, and that kind of, it was totally difficult. But somehow I never minded getting up for my infant twins and taking care of them and being awoken at 2 in the morning and 4 in the morning. And it's just, it's that kind of a love is just remarkable. And yet, how if we don't, the Tibetans also talk about in an effort, as a practice to develop compassion. They talk about motherly loving kindness, about thinking about how much your mother loved you, and then how every person in the world was like your mother, and so you're seeing the whole world as with that same kind of love as a parent and a child. And that works okay if you had a loving mother or an auntie or a grandmother or somebody who loved and took care of you and gave you that kindness. But I think in our society, a lot of us never had those experiences, or not to that degree. And so it's harder for us to kind of develop that, and we're taught to be, independent and not need anything, and I'm number one and I'm first and I'm going to win, and so I think it's more difficult for us to experience that kind of love. But again, it has to start really with ourselves. Are we able to somehow find that through just the love of the world, love of friends, pets, family, the natural world? I've been reading Robin Kimmerer in the book Braiding Sweetgrass, and she talks about nature in such a loving way. She talks about going into, what if we, as we took a walk through nature, and we experienced this kind of connection with nature and our loving the world, and seeing a tree and feeling our love for it. And then what if we felt that the tree loved us back? What if we felt that nature loves us back? Like we are so wholly connected and intrinsically connected with it that the whole world loves us back. I just love that. I just think that's true. That is the way it is. It's the love between the parent and the child. You can't break it apart, even if you hit it with an axe. Even if you hit it with an axe. And I'm going to read Santideva, because Santideva here was a 18th century, 8th century monk. Everyone, we've read a lot about him. And, he wasn't a mother or a grandmother, and he was a monastic in a time when renunciation of the world and giving up all desire and cutting off everything was the mode. That was really the purpose of practice at that time. And yet he writes, all those who slight me to my face or do me any other evil, even though they blame or slander me, may they attain the fortune of enlightenment. May I be a guard for those who are protectorless, a guide for those who journey on the road, for those who wish to go across the water. May it be a boat, a raft, a bridge. May it be an isle for those who yearn for landfall, a lamp for those who long for light, for those who need a resting place, a bed. For all who need a servant, may I be their slave. May I be the wishing jewel, the vase of plenty, a word of power and the supreme healing. May I be a tree of miracles. For every being, the abundant cow. Like the earth and the pervading elements, enduring as the sky itself endures. For boundless multitudes of living beings, may I be their ground and sustenance. Talking about love always makes me cry, so sorry. But anyway, yeah. So I think that, we grow into this love over time. It's like, it's taken me such a long time to feel unconditional friendliness for myself, for all of my foibles and mistakes, and done this and done that, and just to be able to hold myself with a bit of humor and levity and laugh at my mistakes and be just a little bit of detachment. I find as a grandmother now, it's a bit easier because, it's not totally on me. As a young mother, I was so worried about, am I going to raise them right? And are they going to go to the right school and, grow up and do all these things? And now as a grandmother, there's more of a sense of like, again, a bit of detachment that, well, they get to go home at night. It's not my total responsibility, for one thing. And then also, I have more faith that, like, by the time they're in college, they're going to be okay. They're going to take a shower and brush their teeth, and they're not going to throw stuff across the room, and they're not going to, refuse to comb their hair. I mean, there's a sense of like, oh, you can, if my granddaughter's, crying, it's the end of the world because her stuffed animal is in the other room, I have a little more of a sense of like, oh, well, they're there, dear, it's really not that terrible. And you're gonna get it that, one day. And I guess that's how Buddhas regard us, of like, they're there. you know, you really aren't standing in water crying you thirst. You really aren't totally isolated from everything. And there's more of that grandmotherly kindness to me is like being able to say, oh, yeah, you fell down and bumped your knee and you made another mistake and you did this and that, but it's really okay. It's really okay. Um, yeah, to be able to offer that to ourselves, and then we can start to offer it to the rest of the world. We can have that same kind of compassion that, oh, well, I don't have to hate this person who's thinking differently than I am, because that's just the way they see it. We're all going to grow and evolve. We're all going to move on. So let's see if I can go back to this. So Caoshan asked the monastic, a child went back to her parent. Why don't they recognize each other? And Caoshan said, it's quite natural like this. This is like my personal koan too. How can the world be totally enlightened and so messed up? How can it be that I don't recognize my own true nature and make all these mistakes all the time? How can that be? And Caoshan said, well, it's quite natural like this. Said, where is the love between the parent and the child? He said, the love between the parent and the child. He said, it's a beginningless and endless intimacy, a continuum. But he said, what is the love between the parent and the child? Caoshan said, it cannot be split apart even when hit with an axe. It is simply not two. It is simply not two. And then bring us back to freedom, and end with, I want to just close with this. This is a beautiful poem that I've just reread and loved for years and years. It's called Free and Easy. So it's about our freedom. It's by Lama Gendun Rinpoche. And he says, happiness, or we could say freedom, happiness cannot be found through great effort and willpower, but it is already present in open relaxation and letting go. Do not strain yourself. There is nothing to do or undo. Whatever momentarily arises in the body-mind has no real importance at all, has little reality whatsoever. Why identify with and become attached to it, passing judgment upon it and ourselves? Far better to simply let the entire game happen on its own, springing up and falling back like waves, without changing or manipulating anything. And notice how everything vanishes and reappears magically again and again, time without end. Only our searching for happiness, for freedom, prevents us from seeing it. It's like a vivid rainbow which you pursue without ever catching it, or a dog chasing its own tail. Although peace and happiness do not exist as an actual thing or place, it is always available and accompanies you every instant. Do not believe in the reality of good and bad experiences. They are like today's ephemeral weather, like rainbows in the sky. Wanting to grasp the ungraspable, you exhaust yourself in vain. As soon as you open and relax this tight fist of grasping, infinite space is there, inviting, open, and comfortable. Make use of this spaciousness, this freedom, this natural ease. Don't search any further. Don't go into the tangled jungle looking for the great awakened elephant who is already resting quietly at home in front of your own hearth. Nothing to do or undo, nothing to force, nothing to want, and nothing missing. Emaho, marvelous. Everything happens by itself.